911, what's your emergency?
Help! Please, somebody help me! There's an alligator attacking my neighbor, Megan Carter!
Stay on the line. Is she conscious?
I don't know. She's screaming, but then she goes under the water.
In the quiet town of Cypress Grove, Florida, a community surrounded by citrus groves and sunlit canals, a backyard sanctuary turned into a scene of primal terror. For 5 years, Megan Carter had raised a creature whose bloodline stretched back millions of years, an American alligator named Titan. What began as compassion for a fragile hatchling grew into a dangerous delusion. Megan believed she had closed the gap between humanity and the untamed. She thought patience, affection, and daily care could erase instinct. But on a sweltering August afternoon, that illusion broke. In the still heat of summer, Titan revealed the truth: nature never forgets what it is. This was no wildlife preserve, no zoo with steel barriers and trained staff. This was a suburban backyard, and in her own swimming pool, the animal she once called her closest companion would become her executioner. You're watching Animal Reckoning, where the most shocking wildlife encounters are brought to life. If this story grips you, make sure to subscribe, like, and share, because what you're about to see is only the beginning. Megan Carter was just 28 years old when her life ended violently in Cypress Grove. The town, better known for its orange orchards and family-run farms, had never seen a case like this. Locals remembered Megan as more than a neighbor. She was the woman everyone called when a wild creature was found, hurt, or abandoned. Her passion for wildlife wasn't casual. It was the very foundation of her daily life. Injured herons, orphaned raccoons, even possums struck by cars, Megan took them all in. Her small rehabilitation center functioned as a revolving door for the forgotten and the wounded. But of all the animals that passed through her care, none captured her devotion like Titan. She found him 5 years earlier along the shallow, reed-choked banks of the Apalachicola River, a hatchling barely 8 inches long. His belly scales still bore faint stripes, his body frail enough to fit in one hand. Most people would have stepped back immediately. Megan instead wrapped him in a towel and carried him home, convinced she was saving a life. She named him Titan. Friends remembered how quickly she grew attached, often joking that he had imprinted on her the way a duckling bonds to its mother. Through her rehabilitation center, she even secured a wildlife permit, rare but legal, that allowed her to keep Titan as he grew. And grow he did. By 3 years old, Titan measured over 5 feet in length. By 5, he had stretched past 8 feet, his muscular tail and armored hide, unmistakable signs of maturity. Concerns rose just as quickly. Wildlife officers, veterans of years spent managing Florida's predator population, warned Megan directly. They explained in clear terms that no matter the care, no matter the time spent in human company, an alligator never stops being an apex predator. Instinct, hunger, scent, territoriality would always outweigh abstract ideas like trust or affection. The warnings were firm, backed by science and experience. But Megan dismissed them. She believed her bond with Titan placed her outside the rules of nature. To Megan Carter, Titan wasn't dangerous. He was different. She dismissed the warnings of wildlife officers and neighbors, choosing instead to believe she had discovered a rare exception. Megan fed him by hand, swam beside him in her backyard pool, even let him lounge in the sun at her feet while she read. The proof, she thought, was undeniable. Photos filled her social media. Titan's massive head resting in her lap, videos of him rising from the water at the sound of her voice as though he were a loyal dog. Her followers were divided. Some marveled at the extraordinary bond, leaving comments filled with awe. Others were horrified, pleading with her to stop before tragedy struck. She treated Titan like her child. One colleague later recalled their voice edged with unease. Maybe that was the problem. For 5 years, nothing happened until the day everything did. Titan was not a pet in any true sense. He was a product of the swamps, a descendant of reptiles that had outlived the dinosaurs. Megan had discovered him in the summer of 2018, a tiny hatchling no longer than 6 inches, chirping faintly on the muddy banks of the Apalachicola River. His mother was gone, and his chances of survival were almost zero. Megan carried him home, convinced she had saved a life. Under her state-issued rehabilitation license, Megan applied for and received a special permit, an authorization that allowed her to raise Titan indefinitely. At first, she housed him indoors in a climate-controlled enclosure with heating lamps and a custom-built pond. She fed him by hand, mixing ground turkey with vitamins, tapping the spoon against the wall to condition him to feeding cues. To Megan, it was no different than raising an infant. Each feeding, each moment of contact reinforced her belief that Titan was unique. Unlike other alligators, she told herself he knew her, he trusted her. By the time he reached 3 feet in length, she had moved him outside into a pen with a shallow pool. At 4 feet, that pool was replaced with a converted in-ground swimming pool, which Titan now ruled as his own territory. Megan swam with him almost daily, convinced that her presence built trust and deepened their bond. Wildlife experts saw something far less magical. To them, Titan's calm behavior was not affection, but simple conditioning. He was associating her with food, with routine, with territory he now considered his. Yet outwardly, Titan gave no signs of aggression. Megan could drift beside him, stroke the ridges of his jaw, even rest her hand against the armored scales of his back. Titan would close his eyes motionless in the water, appearing almost serene. To Megan, it was proof of love. To professionals, it was a dangerous illusion, waiting to collapse. For Megan, Titan was comforted by her presence. He recognized her voice, responded to her scent, and in 5 years he had never snapped, hissed, or shown open aggression. It was dangerously easy to believe he regarded her as family. To Megan, Titan wasn't just living beside her, he was living with her, tame and almost affectionate. But nature does not forget what it is. By 2023, Titan had become a 300-pound predator, a living relic of prehistoric power. His tail alone could strike with the force of a club, easily knocking a grown adult to the ground. He had long outgrown his early enclosures, forcing Megan to adapt his care. Feedings once done by hand were now reduced to tossing whole chickens, frozen rats, and fish into the water from a safe distance. Yet Megan continued to wade into the pool with him drifting at his side as though nothing had changed. But everything had. By the summer of 2022, Titan stretched 7.5 feet in length. His body was dense with muscle, his jaws broad and crushing, his once bright eyes now steady and cold. Still, Megan clung to the idea that he was the same fragile hatchling she had rescued from the swamp. She swam with him, spoke to him, and even offered whole chickens meals that vanished between his jaws with thunderous, bone-splintering snaps. Concerns mounted, neighbors whispered uneasily, and friends began urging her to let him go. Officials took notice as well. Kenneth Lyles, a veteran field officer with the Florida Wildlife Commission, personally inspected the property. Titan's size was noted in his report, as were the shifts in behavior, more defensive posture, frequent hissing signs of territorial dominance. What struck Lyles most was not Titan, but Megan. Her unwavering, defiant confidence disturbed him. At one point, he warned her directly, "Instincts always kick in." "He's not a dog, Megan." She only smiled, brushing the warning aside as if she had heard it all before. To her, such cautions were born of fear, not fact. She told him no one knew Titan like she did, that he was calm, predictable, safe, but the cracks were showing. Neighbors reported guttural bellows echoing during feeding times. One man swore he saw Titan rear up, slamming his tail against the fence when Megan approached with a bucket of food. A local teenager walking her dog past the property said she froze in terror when Titan lunged against the chain-link jaws, gaping wide, the raw force of his attack rattling the fence. The warnings were no longer abstract. Titan's instincts were surfacing, undeniable to all but Megan. Still, Megan refused to acknowledge the undeniable change in Titan. Online, she posted videos that painted a very different picture from what her neighbors described. In one clip, Titan rested placidly at the edge of the pool, while Megan sat cross-legged just feet away. She laughed softly, her tone carrying a defensive edge. "He's misunderstood," she told her followers. "People just don't get him. He's not dangerous. He just needs trust." The comments told another story. Some begged her to stop swimming with him, to let him go before it was too late. Others were blunt, calling Titan a ticking time bomb. But Megan never replied. The warnings were clear, repeated over and over, but ignored. And in a matter of weeks, those fears would be realized. On August 18, 2023, Cypress Grove baked under heavy summer humidity, the kind that clings to the skin and slows every step. Megan walked into her backyard with a pool skimmer and a bucket, preparing to clean the water, as she had countless times before. Algae spread across the surface, clouding the once clear pool. Just beneath the shallow end floated Titan, his immense body half hidden in the green haze. Normally, these sessions passed without incident. Titan would hover nearby, curious at times, indifferent at others. But this day was different. His stillness carried weight. His eyes appeared half closed, but the tension in his body was unmistakable. Muscles coiled just beneath the surface. Megan, used to calm routines, ignored the warning signs. She stepped into the water with the same confidence that had defined every interaction for 5 years. What she didn't realize was that Titan was already agitated. He had been fed less than an hour earlier a large meal that left him full yet restless. Primal instincts, dormant but never erased, stirred beneath that calm exterior. As Megan dipped the skimmer into the water, Titan shifted. His tail swept beneath her legs in a sudden fluid strike, faster than she could react. Then came the jaws. His mouth clamped down on her right leg with bone-crushing force. Without hesitation, Titan began the maneuver wildlife experts know as a death roll, a violent spin designed to tear apart prey. Megan's scream cut through the still air, raw and piercing, carrying across fences and gardens. She fought desperately, thrashing in the water, but the alligator's grip was absolute. The peaceful afternoon shattered. Neighbors froze at the sound before reaching for their phones in panic. Megan had thought it was just another cleaning, another ordinary moment spent caring for the creatures she loved. But Titan had other plans. At approximately 3:15, Clara Monroe, Megan's next-door neighbor, was tending her garden when she heard the first thrash, followed by screams that turned her blood cold. She dropped her tools and ran to the fence. What she saw froze her in place. Titan, the massive reptile she had only ever glimpsed from afar, was thrashing violently in the pool. Megan's body was trapped in his jaws, her right leg locked between rows of crushing teeth. The force was unimaginable, a brutal display of ancient power. And as Clara looked on in horror, Titan spun again, dragging Megan deeper into the nightmare of the water. The death roll was a terrifying primal maneuver, perfected over millions of years to subdue and dismantle prey. The pool water exploded into chaos, swirling with sediment and streaks of red as Titan spun Megan beneath the surface again and again. Her screams, ragged and desperate, ricocheted off the neighboring houses. "Help, please!" her voice cracked through the humid air, but the words were quickly smothered by the violence of the water. On the other side of the fence, Clara Monroe's hands shook uncontrollably as she dialed 911, her voice trembling into the receiver. "There's blood in the pool," she gasped between sobs. "She's not moving. Please hurry. An alligator's got her." Titan's jaws held fast around Megan's leg, dragging her toward the deeper end of the pool. The water darkened further, streaked with ominous clouds of blood. Megan's thrashing weakened her movements, slowing with each passing second. Neighbors, drawn by the horrific noise, stood frozen in disbelief. Some peered through windows, others clutched fence posts, powerless witnesses to a nightmare unfolding before their eyes. Then came the sirens, high-piercing and urgent, cutting through the heavy Florida air. Within 8 minutes of Clara's call, the first emergency vehicle tore into the quiet suburban street. Paramedics rushed through the backyard gate, trailed by officers from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and their faces set with grim determination. The scene was chaos. Neighbors clustered at the edges, their expressions etched with shock. The pool, once a calm suburban luxury, had transformed into a churning, blood-stained arena. Wildlife officers advanced with long control poles, tools designed for dangerous reptiles but never intended for a backyard pool. Titan thrashed violently, his massive tail slamming against the concrete edge, each strike echoing like a gunshot. Every move carried risk. One misstep and another person could have been pulled into the water. The officers pressed forward, carefully jabbing poles toward Titan, forcing him back from the limp body floating near the deep end. At last, paramedics waded in, gripping Megan with both urgency and caution. With sheer effort, they hauled her from the water, her body motionless, her blood mixing into the pool behind them. The rescue was not a victory, it was a recovery. By the time Megan was pulled free, the irreversible horror had already taken its toll. Megan's body was pulled from the water, limp and frighteningly pale, her skin marked by deep cuts and crushing wounds. The damage to her right leg was catastrophic, teeth marks and lacerations, leaving no doubt about the predator responsible. On top of the trauma, the unmistakable signs of drowning were present. Her breathing was shallow, her lungs already filling with water. Paramedics fought to stabilize her as she was rushed by ambulance to the nearest trauma center. Surgeons worked through the night, but the damage was beyond repair. Hours later, in a sterile hospital room filled with the low hum of machines and muffled prayers, Megan Carter was pronounced dead. The loss sent shockwaves through Cypress Grove. But the crisis did not end with her death. Titan, the once beloved companion, was quickly subdued with tranquilizer darts. By state wildlife protocol, any captive alligator involved in a fatal attack was considered an immediate danger. Titan was euthanized shortly after capture, bringing a grim end to a relationship that had crossed a boundary nature never allowed. News of Megan's death spread quickly, rippling beyond the town into state and national headlines. In the days that followed, candlelight vigils were held in the local park. Friends and neighbors carried photos of Megan, smiling, many of them taken when Titan was still a small, fragile hatchling resting in her hands. Stories poured out of her endless kindness, her dedication to rescuing animals others feared or abandoned. But not every memory was comfortable. Former colleagues from the Regional Wildlife Center admitted that concerns had grown quietly for years. "She loved him, yes," said Sarah Middleton, a fellow rehabilitator, her voice breaking. But somewhere along the way, she forgot what he really was, a wild animal. Instincts don't vanish. That warning echoed across the community and quickly ignited a larger debate. Titan's death, paired with Megan's tragedy, pushed Florida's exotic animal laws back into the spotlight. Advocates demanded stricter regulations on keeping predators in residential areas. Wildlife officials appeared on national broadcasts urging the public to learn from the case. Wild animals don't lose their instincts. Domestication is a myth, stated Dr. Marcus Lanning, a leading herpetologist. You can't train nature out of an alligator's DNA. These creatures are engineered for survival. Once they reach adulthood, they revert to their natural behaviors, and that often ends with bloodshed. Megan's death became more than a local tragedy. It became a chilling parable, a reminder of the dangerous line between compassion and control. Animal behaviorist Dr. Leah Torres, who has studied reptiles for more than 20 years, offered sobering insight into the fatal afternoon. In her words, Titan's behavior wasn't sudden but inevitable. The moment Megan entered the water that day, the ancient predator simply followed instincts that had always been there. Alligators are territorial by nature, and Titan was no exception. As Dr. Leah Torres explained, once he reached over 7 feet and hundreds of pounds, his instincts to defend his space intensified. To Titan, Megan, no matter how familiar, was no longer just a caretaker. In his territory, she had become a rival presence. Dr. Torres pointed to the timing of the attack as a critical factor. Alligators often show heightened aggression right after feeding, she explained. Their hunger may be satisfied, but their territorial instincts are triggered. Entering the pool so soon after a meal placed Megan directly into a dangerous moment when irritability and primal reflexes dominate. She further emphasized that behaviors Megan had once dismissed, hissing, tail-slapping, lunging, were not quirks or moods. They were warnings. To trained eyes, they were clear signals. But to Megan, emotionally invested and blinded by years of care, those signs looked like harmless habits, even affection. That misinterpretation proved fatal. The reality, Dr. Torres concluded, is stark. Wild predators live by instinct, not trust. The boundaries between human and animal must never be blurred. Emotional bonds cannot erase millions of years of evolution. No matter how much love or care is given, predators remain exactly what they are: powerful, unpredictable, and inherently wild. And so the story of Megan Carter stands as a somber warning. She dedicated her life to saving wildlife, but in trying to tame nature, she lost her life to it. Her memorial, surrounded by candles and photographs of her smiling with animals she once saved, remains a harrowing reminder of how fragile that line between affection and wildness can be. If Megan's story unsettled you, if it made you reconsider the risks, share it. Spread awareness of the dangers of exotic pet ownership. Subscribe to our channel for more true stories from the wild, stories that must be remembered, not repeated. And carry with you this truth: wild animals are not toys. They are not pets. Today, the blood-stained patio in Cypress Grove, where Megan once laughed and filmed her videos, stands silent, a permanent monument to a choice that went tragically wrong. The locked gate, now marked with a stark warning, "No exotic pets allowed," may be closed. But the lesson it leaves behind is wide open for those willing to listen. Wild animals are not toys, and they are certainly not pets.